Welcome back to Andersen. It's finally nice enough that we can record outside today. We are here to talk about another hobby farm controversy. So here on Farm Fights, we tackle issues that if you were to post them in an online group, you would get a ton of arguments. Like people would be up in arms. So today we are discussing Marek's disease. This one, you get people of all stripes. You get people telling you it's the end of the world, your entire flock is doomed, and you get people telling you it's no big deal, don't even tell anyone you have it, it's fine. Neither of those positions are correct. So let's talk about Marek's disease. We're going to talk about what it is, what you can do about it, and we're going to talk about the Marek's vaccine. So, what is Marek's disease? Now, if you have received a recent diagnosis of Marek's in your flock, I know that it's devastating. I know that it's frightening, and I know that you're probably on the verge of panic. And I've got cats literally everywhere. I've got 4 cats right here. Doesn't matter. But if you are facing that diagnosis, you're probably a little bit freaked out. I'm not going to tell you not to panic. The initial diagnosis can be panic-worthy. So if you need to panic, take a minute, get it out of your system, because panic will not serve you in dealing with or making decisions about Marek's disease. So if you need to panic, go away, panic, come back when you're calm, and then it's time to think about what Marek's is and what you can do about it and what your choices are. So Marek's disease is a herpes virus. So if you've ever had cold sores, that's a herpes virus. And as you would know, if you have cold sores, they come and they go. You'll have a flare-up and then they'll go away for months or sometimes even years. But they eventually come back because that virus is now a part of you. You have that virus within you. I'm just watching the rabbits. They have been escaping on the regular, so I'm just keeping an eye on them. That's what I'm doing right now. So, a herpes virus, like our virus, enters the body and it sticks around, and you may experience flare-ups, you may experience long periods of dormancy, and when it comes to the Marek's disease virus in chickens, some of the chickens will succumb immediately to it, others will be lifelong carriers. Okay? There is no cure, there is no treatment. All right? That is very important to know. You're going to have some people that peddle all these different things you can use to get Marek's out of your flock. You can't. Once your birds have Marek's, you have Marek's in your flock. They all have it, even if none of them have symptoms. So anyone who's trying to sell you something that will cure Marek's, it's not going to work. Okay? They are just trying to make money off of your pain. So don't spend money on a product that guarantees they're going to cure Marek's and get it out of your flock. It doesn't work that way. Marek's is not curable. All right, so Marek's is a herpes virus. There are a few different forms of Marek's. There's actually 4. One of them is incredibly rare. So there's the ocular type. I'm not going to discuss all 4. I'm just going to discuss the types you're most likely to find on your farm. The ocular type, where they look like they have almost like cataracts, where one pupil, sometimes both pupils, but it usually starts in just one eye, looks really wonky. Okay, they can't see. They probably walk weird, so they may have some neurological symptoms. And that's called ocular Marek's. Then there is a fully neurological Marek's that just causes neurological symptoms. And then there is one that causes tumors and stuff inside the body. And that one can cause paralysis. And this is the one most backyard chicken keepers will be familiar with because this is the one that crops up a lot. So this is one of the main strains, this and ocular. So this particular one, you're going to find chickens that are kind of laying down. They're not really moving around. They really should be, and they're not. And maybe one leg is sticking out behind them and the other leg is tucked under them, and it's just weird. If you find a chicken like that, don't immediately jump to Marek's, okay? Because another thing it could be is actually a vitamin deficiency. So before you go, oh no, we have Marek's, we're doomed, try giving vitamins to your chickens. Now remember I said there is no cure for Marek's. If giving vitamins to your chickens fixes the Marek's, then it wasn't Marek's. Then it was just a vitamin deficiency. You are fine. Move on with your life. If the vitamins don't work, there's a high chance you're dealing with Marek's. Okay? So, you have Marek's in your flock. What do you do? Well, first of all, you can expect some fatalities in your flock, unfortunately. Now, how much depends on what type of flock you have. And when I say what type, I mean what is their health status. So a chicken that is fairly young but not a juvenile, so an adult chicken, okay, an adult chicken which is of laying age or older, and one that is still fairly young, so still like under 3, a chicken in that age group and in good health, doesn't have any underlying medical problems, is probably going to be okay. You're probably going to experience 20 to 30% losses if your flock is all about chickens like that. And I know 20 to 30%, that sounds really high. It is kind of, but it's a much better case than if you have a flock that is made up of very young chickens, very old chickens, or chickens that are immunocompromised and are subject to a lot of health problems anyway. If you have chickens that are young, old, or unhealthy, you could experience up to 80% death rate. And that is really devastating. So if you tend to have a flock where you've taken in all these rescue chickens and you have a whole bunch of them and they've never really been very healthy, but they tend to be okay, but they're not great, you can expect higher losses than somebody with a young, healthy flock. All right, that's why you will see when people are talking about Marek's, well, I only lost 2 chickens. Oh, I lost all of my chickens. So you get that real variation because it depends on the initial nature of that flock. Yes, I know. Which cat is talking to me? Which one? I hear a cat. The sun's in my eyes and I can't see. Oh, it's Bowser. I can't see who's who. The sun is directly in my eyes. That's okay. So, how many chickens you lose is really dependent on the health of your starter flock. Before Marek's got there, what was their health status? What was their age? So that's why you see such a variation. That's why some people experience almost no losses and some people experience a lot of losses. So, Marek's itself, okay? Marek's has hit your flock. You've lost a few chickens, but now you're okay, right? And the answer is no, you're not. Like the herpes virus that we get for cold sores, where you get cold sores every few months or every few years, Marek's is permanent. It never goes away. It is not like the flu. You know, you get the flu and you get sick and eventually the flu goes away and you don't have the flu and you're not contagious for the flu and you're fine, okay? If the flu didn't take you out, you're fine. That's not the way Marek's works. Marek's enters the body of the chicken and it stays there. So once Marek's is in your flock, you now are a Marek's positive flock, even if you have had no symptoms for 4 or 5 years. Any chicken that is in that flock is a Marek's positive chicken. So it's never going away. You have that in your flock now. That's just the way it is. So what do? The first thing you should do before you make any real decisions, shut your flock down. And when I say that, I don't mean get rid of your flock. I mean no chickens in or out. Close your flock completely. You don't sell any chickens. You don't buy any chickens. Stop everything. Go with what you've got. Then you can kind of settle down, figure out what you want to do, what is the best approach for you as you decide how you're going to move forward, because there's a couple of options. So do that first. Then what you want to do is evaluate your own situation. So the reason why Marek's can be such a big deal is that chickens that are actively battling Marek's, not chickens that have had Marek's, that still have Marek's, but they're not in an active flare-up, but it really affects a chicken that's flaring up. They don't lay well. You can't really use them for meat because they're growing tumors inside their body. So a lot of times people just decide, you know what, I make my money from raising these birds, so I'm going to euthanize my flock and start over. That's a choice you can make if that aligns with how you raise your chickens. Because there are a couple of things you now have to be aware of if you have a Marek's positive flock. One, any chicken you bring in, regardless of its previous health status, becomes a Marek positive chicken as soon as it hits your flock. As soon as it's in there, it's now Marek's positive. Hi Jake, even if it never, ever shows symptoms, Jake may knock over my camera. We're just going to live with that for a minute. But even if that chicken never shows symptoms, that chicken is Marek's positive. So you want to be really careful bringing chickens into your flock, because that chicken really shouldn't leave your flock. Because the other thing is, any chicken you rehome is a Marek's positive chicken, and any flock it goes to is now a Marek's positive flock. Remember, Marek's doesn't go away. You can't cure it. It's just the way it is. So you really shouldn't rehome chickens from your flock. Okay? You really should not. They should stay the rest of their lives with you. You shouldn't take any bird from a Marek's positive flock to a poultry swap. You shouldn't take any bird from a Marek's positive flock to a poultry show. Those chickens should stay on your property. You should practice proper biosecurity. So cleaning your feet, cleaning your hands, making sure you don't transmit that Marek's in your flock to your neighbor's flock. But here's the other thing about Marek's. Unless you know your Marek's negative, you should assume your Marek's positive. And it's because, at least in North America, it's everywhere. Now, I happen to know where Marek's negative only because I completely panicked. Because we lost a chicken in the fall. We lost one chicken. So it wasn't even like this big outbreak. We had one chicken die. We had frizzle die. And I completely panicked, and I called my vet, and I'm like, I was just, you know what, there had been a couple of spots in, not even in our area, but a couple of people in our local farm group who had popped up with Marek's, and I'm like, oh God, we've got it too. And so I panicked, which I shouldn't have. I just said we shouldn't panic, right? So I panicked. I called my vet. I said, I want a necropsy done on this bird. I want to know why she died, and I think it's Marek's. And even though she had actually none of the symptoms for Marek's, I was just panicking. So he came out, he collected her body, he did the necropsy, he said, congratulations, it's not Marek's. It was just failure to thrive. She was fairly young. She just was never going to finish growing. So I'm like, oh, okay. That's fine then. So, whatever. So we're fine. We don't have Marek's. It's okay. We don't have Marek's. But we could have, okay, because it's literally everywhere. It can be in every single flock. It is transmitted by wild birds. It is transmitted just by the dander and the dust that the birds produce. So it's everywhere. If you don't know that your Marek's negative, assume your Marek's positive. That doesn't mean, even unless you know your Marek's positive, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go to poultry shows or anything like that. But you should practice biosecurity as if you have a Marek's positive flock. Frankly, we should all be doing that anyway. So you shouldn't let people come visit your flock. You shouldn't let strange birds enter your flock. That's one of the leading causes of spreading Marek's, is taking in a chicken, especially from like a poultry swap or something. You didn't have Marek's, and then you went to this poultry swap and you got this chicken, and you brought this chicken and you put it in your flock, and now you have Marek's. That tends to be how it happens. So the best way to prevent having Marek's in your flock is not to bring in adult birds. So how is it transmitted? Chicken to chicken. Specifically chicken to chicken. So it is present in their dander. It is, if they are in the area, that's where the Marek's is. So it's on their feathers, it's in their dust, it's in their feeder, it's in their poop, it's everywhere. Okay? It's in the soil now. And it's not like, you're going to hear some people say, well, once you've had Marek's, you have to burn your coop to the floor and you have to wait 7 years before you can have that. No, the virus doesn't live that long. But while you have active chickens who have Marek's, yes, it's everywhere on your farm. It's just there. So if you know you have Marek's, the best thing to do is just to not bring new birds in. Just don't do it. Okay? Don't bring new birds into your flock if you have Marek's, because you're just asking for trouble. I don't bring new birds, adult birds, into my flock anyway. I stick with chicks and with eggs. So here's the other question people ask about how it's transmitted. Is it transmitted from parent to baby through the egg? No. There's never been a documented case. Thank you, Jabba. There has never been a documented case of it passing from the mom, the hen, to the chick through the egg. Okay? So you can still hatch eggs from your incubator. If you gathered those eggs, they never hatched under mom. You put them in an incubator, you hatch them in there, the baby should be Marek's free. Okay? So, you don't have to worry about that. That is okay. You can still hatch babies and keep them separate from your main flock. You really 30 feet at least, and don't tend them wearing the same shoes that you wore over there. Keep your Marek's positive flock completely isolated. You don't want it to migrate to a new flock. So if you are going to keep the old flock on site, you definitely want to make sure that you are completely separating it from any new birds. those new birds, if they come into contact with the old birds, they have Marek's now too. It is highly contagious. Even a bird that doesn't show any symptoms is going to pass the virus on to other birds. They don't have any immunity to it. Okay? None. So you will hear people say, well, I think my flock's immune to Marek's. No, they're not. You just have a group of birds that are not succumbing to the symptoms. Eventually they will. They will get old. Their immune system kind of goes down. And because the immune system goes down, they end up eventually succumbing to the virus. So your birds still have Marek's. They are not immune. Immune implies that they don't carry it, and that's not true. Even a perfectly healthy chicken that has never exhibited any of the symptoms definitely has Marek's. Okay. So back to what do you do about it? Well, you can euthanize your entire flock. I don't generally recommend that. Most vets, like I'm not a veterinarian, you want to talk to your vet or you want to talk to a poultry science expert to get a really good idea of what you should do. But I generally do not recommend just euthanizing your flock unless, now it makes sense for people who really do use their flocks to produce money, so they need the egg production or they need the meat production. So if your livelihood depends on that flock, that actually might be an option that you have to take. I hate the idea of senselessly euthanizing birds, but depending on your situation isn't mine, so your situation might dictate that that's the option you choose. In most cases, I would tell people, close your flock, no birds in or out, don't sell any birds, don't buy any birds, let that flock live out their life. It won't be a long life. Chickens don't live 40 years or anything. And especially chickens with Marek's, even if they were fairly young and strong and have never had any symptoms, probably by about 5 or 7, they're going to start succumbing anyway. So I would, if I ended up with Marek's in my flock, I would close my flock, no birds in or out, and I would simply let them live out their life. After they died, I would clean everything up, spray everything down really well with disinfectant. I would UV light the heck out of everything because UV light kills a lot of stuff. And then I would let the coop dry and sit for a few months, and then I would start another flock. I would not personally euthanize my entire flock. I understand why some people would, why that is what makes sense to them. That's not what I would choose to do. Now we're going to talk about the vaccine. This is where people get mad. Before we can talk about whether or not you should vaccinate, we have to clarify just at a very basic level how vaccines work. So they're not some kind of magic shield. You don't vaccinate a bird for Marek's and therefore Marek's can never get anywhere near that bird. Vaccines only work by the virus entering the body and encountering the antibodies. So it's basically an email. Think of a vaccine like an email to your body. And that email says, if you see this virus, this is what you do to fight it. Okay? That's how essentially, on a very basic level, a vaccine works. So the vaccine will not stop your chicken from getting Marek's. Okay? That's not the way it works. It doesn't stop your chicken from getting Marek's. Marek's will still enter their body. However, it will stop them developing severe symptoms and will stop them from dying most of the time. So just like any vaccine, it is not 100% effective. Hi, DK. DK's wandering over to see me. But it's not 100% effective. So there will be a small minority, I think it's 97% effective. So that means there will be about 3% of birds that still get Marek's and still exhibit symptoms and possibly even still pass away from it. So it's a very effective vaccine, but there are a percentage of birds that still will get it. So let's talk about the vaccine itself. The vaccine has to be administered when they're babies, little, like 1 or 2 days old. So if you are buying adult birds, it's too late anyway. So you don't have to worry about vaccinating. It was either done or not done. There is a version of the vaccine that can be given while the chick is still inside the egg at around day 18 of incubation. Both of these varieties are really expensive for a backyard chicken keeper. So you buy a vial, and that vial has something like 1,000 doses. Do you hatch 1,000 chickens at a time? Because once you open it, it doesn't store well, so you have to use it up. If you only hatch 10 chickens a week, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for you to have that vial spend all that money. You can if you want. I'm not telling you how to spend your money. If you want to buy that vial and vaccinate your chickens, then you absolutely should do that. If you feel like that provides you with a lot of security, then you should do that. But I personally am not going to buy a vial, spend that much money for, usually in the summer, sometimes we hatch up to 60 chicks a week, and that's not 1,000. So it's really, really expensive per chick for a backyard poultry keeper. It only really makes sense for the large scale guys, the people who are hatching out thousands of birds a week. So for them, absolutely it makes sense because it will protect those birds. And especially for laying chickens that are going into laying farms, these chickens really should be vaccinated against Marek's, because remember, Marek's drops how much they lay, and if their point is to produce eggs, you don't want them to have Marek's. So, should you vaccinate your chickens? Honestly, probably, if you have the option to do so. So if you got them from a hatchery, you were probably asked, do you want to vaccinate, yes or no? And if you bought them from a feed store, there's a good chance the chickens you bought were already vaccinated, because a lot of hatcheries are vaccinating them now at hatch. Ignore the creaking. That word behind me is not secure. Anyway, so you probably have some vaccinated chickens in your flock, and you probably have some unvaccinated chickens in your flock, which brings up another point that often circulates. A lot of people will tell you, you can't mix vaccinated and unvaccinated chickens. There's no reason not to. Okay? The vaccinated chickens are protected. The unvaccinated chickens already have it. So there's no reason not to mix them. The reason that advice became prevalent is because people tend to think, well, this chicken is vaccinated, therefore this chicken doesn't have Marek's. But here's the thing. Remember at the beginning of the video we talked about it being a herpes virus? And how that herpes virus in humans, the one that gives you cold sores, it hangs out and it never really goes away? It's the same thing with Marek's. You may have vaccinated that chicken, but that virus entered their body anyway. And it's not a flu virus, remember. In a flu, you get sick, you get sick and it sucks and it's not fun, but eventually it goes away. Marek's doesn't go away. So that chicken is vaccinated and isn't going to get the symptoms and isn't going to die, but it's still got the virus. So the don't mix vaccinated and unvaccinated basically comes from the vaccinated chicken is still Marek's positive. If you rehome that chicken who is vaccinated for Marek's, there's still a chance he could pass it. Is the chance lower? Yes. The vaccine does lower the chance of that chicken passing on the Marek's disease. But it's still a possibility. And too many times people go, well, that chicken's vaccinated, so I don't have to disclose that that chicken has Marek's because he's vaccinated. But he's still a danger to the flock he's going to. So you can mix vaccinated and unvaccinated, but regardless of vaccination status, every chicken in a Marek's positive flock is Marek's positive. They can still potentially pass the virus. So, should you vaccinate? If it's an option for you, probably. If it's not, because it's cost prohibitive, it is incredibly expensive to do it as a backyard chicken keeper. I wish it wasn't. Okay, I wish it was something that I could have my vet out and do, but he'd have to crack. It's not that he doesn't have the vaccine, he does. It's just that he would have to crack that vial and charge me for that entire vial for 60 chicks at most, and that's at the height of my hatching in the summer. Usually I'm hatching less than a dozen a week because it's just for myself. Unless I'm in that selling time of year where I'm selling babies, I'm not hatching that many. So he would have to crack that vial, vaccinate my chicks, because I don't like needles. You can actually do it yourself. It's a subcutaneous injection. It's actually not that big a deal, but I don't like needles. So I would literally pay my vet to do it, and I wouldn't have a problem paying my vet to do it. But he would have to charge me for that vial that is 1,000 doses. I don't want to pay for that. Is that maybe mercenary of me? A little bit. Most of us can't afford it, and it's okay to not be able to afford something as expensive as vaccinating 1,000 chickens when you only hatched 5. Okay? It's absolutely 100% okay to not be able to afford that. A lot of us can't. That's okay. It's okay not to have a ton of money. And it's okay not to be able to afford a vet. It's okay to not have a poultry vet in your area. So should you vaccinate in an ideal world? Probably, because it's a highly effective vaccine. If we all vaccinated our chickens against Marek's, they would all live a longer life. Marek's would become less of a big deal, but remember, it's everywhere. So if we all vaccinated all the time, it would reduce the deaths from Marek's. It would not eliminate the Marek's disease entirely, but it would help. But most of us can't afford it. So that's just, sometimes you just have to face the reality of a situation, and the reality is most of us backyard chicken keepers simply will never be able to afford it. Finally, before we go today, I wanted to point out that ending up with Marek's in your flock is not your fault. There's a lot of shame involved. A lot of shame. People don't want to tell anyone, oh geez, I know I'm Marek's positive, but I don't want to tell anyone because, you know, everyone will say that I didn't keep them well. And there is some truth to the better kept your chickens are, the less likely they are to suffer from Marek's. So your chickens have proper ventilation, they have a clean coop, they're happy, they're healthy, they're free ranging, they are less likely to experience the symptoms. But the virus doesn't care when the last time you cleaned your coop was. So keeping your chickens in fantastic conditions might prevent flare-ups, but it doesn't prevent that initial infection. And that infection could be you bought a chicken from a hobby farm auction. It could be a wild bird got into your barn. And wild birds carry it, especially if you live in North America, where Marek's is pretty much endemic to backyard flocks. A sparrow can carry it from your house to your neighbor's house, and now you all got it. So as much as I understand there's a lot of shame involved when you have a disease like Marek's in your flocks, it's really important to understand that it is not your fault. The only time you can blame yourself for Marek's is if you went out and you bought a chicken and you knew that chicken had Marek's and you threw it into your flock anyway. Well, now your whole flock has Marek's, and yes, that is your fault. But every other scenario is not your fault. It's not your fault your chickens got Marek's. It's not your fault you lost a couple. It's not your fault a bunch of your old ones passed away. That's just what happens sometimes. You can't prevent everything. Even if you have access to a poultry vet, even if you have that vet coming out twice a year to evaluate your farm, even if you vaccinate for everything you can vaccinate for, at some point, you're going to end up with a disease in your flock. It might not be Marek's. We don't have Marek's right now. But we did have coccidia run through us a couple years ago, and it sucked. So, at some point, all chicken keepers are going to deal with disease. It sucks. It's not fair. But you didn't necessarily do anything to cause it. And Marek's is one of those things that is present in so many flocks that unless you deliberately took in a chicken that had Marek's and tossed it in amongst your flock, you're not to blame. Okay? You are not the reason your chickens are sick. They just got sick. So you do the best you can. Remember, there is no treatment. You can try to keep them comfortable. The wind is picking up now. But you can try to keep them comfortable. However, there's nothing you can actually do. Okay? You can't treat it. You can't cure it. And you can't necessarily even prevent it. Unless your chickens are all vaccinated, your entire flock. If your entire flock is vaccinated, they'll still get the disease. They just will not necessarily get sick from that disease, but they still have it. Anyway, that is about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. We'll see you tomorrow.